Welcome to the MMHP and the 989. Podcasting from the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame in downtown Bay City. Channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history. From the city by the bay. And now, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and your host, Scott Baker.
Hey, we're back here at the Rock Legends Hall of Fame in Bay City, Michigan for a chill down time here in the fall of 2023. And we are bringing back for the second time a guest that we were proud to have. The first time around, Fred and myself, Sir Fred and me, were the ones that got a chance to interview him tonight. He gets to have the full crew on board, including Dr. J and Mr. Mike. Mike Johnston, how you doing, Mike?
Good. Thanks.
Mike has the episode that started the bang for us, like the Runaway podcast that we finally had a big hit with, your very first one. And we've had about 5 now that have really been just amazing. And the numbers, including yours, is still growing. But you have a brand new album out now, Fanfares with Northwoods Improvisers.
Right, yeah.
And this is a new lineup. It's a new crew in a sense, recording wise. But we're going to definitely discuss that tonight. But before we start, since people can go back to the first podcast to kind of get your back history, and you're still doing the radio show as well.
Teach a little bit. Same old stuff, yeah.
I just want to know, is Gary or Mike, did you guys have any questions you wanted to get in from that we haven't touched upon? I mean, we'll probably repeat a few, but...
Yeah, you guys have been together, or at least you and Mike Gilmore have been together for 47 years, right?
Right. And the drummer, Nick Ashton, he started playing with us in the mid-'80s. Mike Gilmore since has moved to North Carolina. But, yeah, so I played with Nick for around 40 years now.
And
so.
Is Jordan's involved?
He's kind of like a guest and a friend. Okay. He's kind of not really an official member of the band, but we're kind of a collective. And so we do different things with, play with a lot of different people if we can.
So what's the secret to keeping it together for that long?
Boy, I don't know. I'd say we all get along really well, and that everybody is, willing to work together. And there's a lot of, with any kind of organization, people have to sacrifice things to do it, and so everybody seems pretty willing and happy with the results that we get, and so everybody's kind of willing to chip in and try to make it happen. I think we all feel that the end result is bigger than individuals, so it just happens to be a really good group of people. But in my experience playing with different players, the real good bands, everybody listens to each other when you play, and they give you space, and they respect each other and don't have a lot of personal baggage.
Okay.
And you guys got to carry the torch with Faruq until his passing, so that was a fantastic run.
Yeah, that was a great experience, getting to know him and play with him and stuff.
And you had the Dennis Gonzalez part and the Mike Khoury parts that have Skeeter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, what happened with Skeeter and Mike? Are they still around, or
they're still in Detroit. Skeeter plays quite a bit. Mike sat in with us a few times when we played in Detroit the last few years, and he's not, I would say, overly active, but I'm in touch with him regularly, and he loves Donovan and Dominic, the horn players, and so he's been there to interact with them and stuff. And Mike, great person, great player. And
Dominic and Donovan are the new blood, the fresh activity that you've been with, 5 years now, probably 4 years?
Yeah, in terms of maybe playing gigs, but played with them and jammed with them longer than that. Yeah, known them quite a while now. It's kind of amazing how the years go by fast. So,
go ahead, Fred.
Did the name of the band have anything to do with Northwood Institute?
No, nothing. It was my friends and I, Mike Gilmore and John Plow, who was our first drummer. We grew up in Traverse City, and I was really into free improvising bands. And when I was younger, was really into the Spontaneous Music Ensemble, a British band. And I like the Art Ensemble of Chicago, out of Chicago, obviously. And I kind of like these long names. I thought it was cool when I was younger. So I thought, we were creating an improvised music that wasn't like an urban music. I mean, this is the way I sort of imagined it. And so we were, improvisers from the woods area, and the inspiration when we were younger, we'd hang out and camp out and hike and play music, and it sort of grew out of that, that kind of thing. And so the name just kind of stayed. Some people think it's really horrible, and some people love it, and it's just kind of one of those things. So
it's ironic that Northwoods Institute's right there in Midland too.
Yeah,
it's really close to you guys.
The Northwood thing has kind of gone around a lot since then, So
Yeah.
when I first did my radio program, which I named after a jazz album, Destination Out, I was questioned that didn't make any sense, And now there's all kinds of programs called Destination This and Destination That. It's like, okay. So, but yeah.
Is that an NPR show, Destination Out?
Yeah, it's a show every
Oh,
Sunday night.
Yeah, okay.
NCMU.
That's you?
Yep, that's me.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've been doing that 35 years, maybe.
Yeah. And now we're hitting the spot now on that show where you're a lot of tributes going around too.
Yeah, right.
Pharaoh and Wayne. And,
Yeah, a lot of, it's kind of at that age group. My father passed away a few years ago, and, all of his friends were dead by the time he passed away. He said, as you get older, you'll know if you survive, every year, less and less friends.
Yeah, my dad was in the same situation. He was referring to himself near the end as the last man standing.
Yeah, that's the way my dad, I know
Yeah.
he felt that way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. It didn't seem like a fun existence to me, even though he was in pretty good health.
Yeah. Were you always into jazz when you were growing up, or?
Pretty much. I started out with rock and roll, and like I was a 60s kid, and I bought, like I remember Beatles being on Ed Sullivan and Rolling Stones, and I bought singles, was into the Byrds, and I quickly got into kind of blues rock. And then as I got a little bit older, I remember I was into Michigan rock, big time, and saw most of the bands back then. And I went into a record store. A guy just opened one up in Traverse City, and he asked me what I liked, and I named off Peter Green Into the Game album, which was a free improvised rock record. And I named off a King Crimson song that was improvised. And he said, "Oh, you like improvised music. Why don't you listen to jazz?" And I never really had heard the word improvised before. And I said, "Oh, I do." And so I started to buy jazz records, and I bought a couple, and I didn't have a clue what was going on. And then I struggled a little bit, because I love the sound of the electric guitar, kind of hearing the same kind of emotions being played through a saxophone. But then all of a sudden, it just like a switch went off, and then I kind of never turned back. And then I sold all my electric rock and roll gear and bought an acoustic bass, and kind of never turned back. So
Okay.
Yeah.
It was that 47 years ago that.
I got my acoustic bass in '81, but I
Okay.
borrowed one before that from somebody for a while. So I couldn't afford one right away. So those don't come cheap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now you're to your newest album. How many have you recorded so far?
Let's see. This would be around 18 or 19.
Wow.
Somewhere in there. We did 9 official ones with Faruq, and this is the second one with this band. And then we have scattered things, amidst everything else. And we have some trio Northwoods recordings that have kind of come and gone through the years too. Most of them in the 90s.
Where did you record this one? What studio did you use?
We recorded this in the lecture theater at Delta College.
Really?
Yeah, and I've recorded a lot of things there, and I know the acoustics in the room in there really well, and I can get the room to use. Being one of the benefits, I guess, of teaching over there.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, and so we can kind of camp out more or less in there for a few days and just sort of leave things. So that's worked out pretty well for us. And with a large group, we like to try to get a live studio sound, without overdubbing or plugging in modules of sound. So it's a big environment that, can kind of the natural acoustics are nice. And so anyway, that's just kind of the sound we go after.
Yeah, and well, I noticed on the credits that you were credited with doing the recording and mixing.
Right.
So does that sort of make you the producer of the record
Yeah, I guess,
in a way?
you know, yeah. And I've had friends that have helped me off and on with other ones. I did most all this one. And then my friend Dan Bracken mastered it, and he worked at CMU Public Radio for years. And, you know, I learned a few things from him back in the day. And I've had an opportunity to get to know different record producers in jazz and kind of learn insights. I was friends with Chuck Nessa, who had Nessa Records over in Whitehall, Michigan for a while, that produced a lot of Chicago jazz releases. And he'd been to Rudy Van Gelder's studio, the famous one that Blue Note used. And I can't remember what, the one that Kind of Blue was recorded at in New York City, the Miles Davis, he recorded a record there. And so he was, and I always loved the sound of his recordings, and he was kind enough many years ago to share some secrets with me and help me learn mic placement and what kinds of mics to use and how he got the sound. Because I always thought his recordings for jazz, I like a natural sound where you feel like you're sitting in front of the band. And he really had great studio recordings like that, and so he was very helpful.
And that's the way you do it at Delta, right?
Right,
The whole band is there.
Yeah, we
You're
don't
not-
overdub. We don't
Yeah.
plug a extra little thing in or anything. We just play, and if we make a mistake, we do it again, like the old rock record. Right?
Yeah. Do you do a lot of rehearsing before you go in there?
I think because we all live far apart, we try to keep our chops up, and we run through stuff a little bit, but we try to come prepared, to play, and sometimes it's better than others, but yeah, it's kind of like we're playing a bunch of gigs next week. I know a couple of guys in the band jammed this last weekend together. One guy's doing a solo concert tonight, so everybody's pretty active, doing things.
So you're basically, these gigs are in support of the new album, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, more or less. And then one of the members at the moment lives in Wyoming, and he, so we try to do the gigs. He comes back a couple times a year. We set up the gigs. It helps pay his transportation and then keeps us active and that kind of thing.
So what are the good venues in Michigan for jazz? I know our good friend Bobby Balderrama he's got a smooth jazz outfit called the Robert Lee Review that I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And, doesn't seem to be that many places.
It varies all the time. There's some nice venues in Detroit. We played at Cliff Bell's this year. That was always been a favorite of mine. It's near Comerica Park. It's kind of a little more.
I've been there.
Yeah, nice place. A little more upscale than the last time we played there.
Have you been to the Blue Llama?
I was just going to name that one. Yeah, and we haven't played there, but yeah, that's in near Ann Arbor.
Yeah, that's right next door to the art.
Right.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome
and then
venue.
there's some places where there's interesting music happens, and it's kind of, I don't know, almost like an underground thing that'll move around here and there, and then I think these days you kind of got to be a little creative, like it's not like the old days. I have a few friends that supported themselves playing jazz, and they can barely do that anymore. It's so difficult. If you're not, either got to play Lincoln Center, or there's so many musicians willing to play for nothing, and it's kind of, to me, messing up some of the playing environments, really. So it's like, I guess I'm too old to want to do that, so. And I never got into it to get wealthy, for sure, or I wanted to play jazz, but it's definitely, it's like, I don't know, I did a lot of photography when I was younger, and that's another thing everybody thinks, oh, you're a photographer, you want to do this for nothing for me? And it's like, well, not really.
Do you do a lot of improvising when you're playing?
Yes, yeah. I would kind of describe what we do is members will bring ideas, almost like outlines or sketches, like a coloring book, and then we fill in the blanks, color them in, and try to do it different every time. And if the structure is interesting, we'll play that piece for a while, and sometimes they fade away, and you come up with new ideas. And so right now there's 3 or 4 people in our group that really write interesting stuff. So it's kind of fun, but they're really like conceptualized, and and you know, I think we all prefer improvising over trying to like pre-plan much. You know?
Is that what you did on the album? I know you're credited with doing it, I think, if I remember correctly, 3 songs, right?
Around there, yeah.
Were they kind of like outlines when you brought them in?
They're kind of outlines, you know, like you might be set in a certain time signature and maybe have a theme, and then maybe have an arrangement of when you play the theme or maybe when you don't play the theme. But like, you know, even if there's like phrases that you can use in the piece, those are, if you feel it, play it. If you don't. You know, we don't even like designate solo order on a track. You know, it's like, just, you know, step up if you got something to say and say it, as long as you got something to say, and be cool when you're done. Just walk away and let somebody else step in. And it works really well with, you know, again, it has to be the right people. But, you know, I think a lot of, you know, I think about everything on there. Maybe a couple of them, the horn players decided who was going to solo first or not. But, you know, I would say, you know, they're incredible listeners. And I heard them, we were playing in Detroit last year, and one of them was totally improvising a solo. And usually, like, if, you know, you have 2 people improvising, they get into a conversation, or they might play a supporting line. And they were trading back and forth, and the other person was harmonizing with the solo on the spot. I don't think I'd ever heard even Coltrane or somebody do that. It was, you know, so it's like, I'm pretty stunned by some of the things that I hear. And so,
did you tape that show? Did you tape all your shows?
No, I thought it was taped, but I wouldn't say it's really good sound. Yeah. But, you know, so that kind of thing, that's why I like improvising, and I think we all do, because that, you know, when it's good and the element of surprise is there, it's pretty exciting, you know, and so that's cool.
In listening to it, the new album, I thought at least some of the songs, Luna Turca, Anointed from David to Christ, had kind of like a Mid-Eastern scent or feel to it.
Yeah.
Okay, was that kind of, was that sort of in the plan? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Even your, I thought Swamp Birds had a little bit of that.
Yeah, that's kind of got like an African sensibility,
right,
with the groove and the African log drums at the beginning. Yeah, and I asked Nick if he'd play his African log drums to open it up, but he transitioned to the drum set when he felt like it on that piece.
And Luna Turca's Don Cherry too.
Right. And like we're playing, the gig we're playing this next week at Mid-Michigan is sort of funded by one of like the cultural departments over there, and they asked us to kind of present like a cultural presentation. So we sort of outlined all a lot of our tunes that are based on African or South American or Native American pieces. Now, I play Native American flutes, but then the things I come up with, then we adapt them to jazz band and stuff like that, you know. So, but when I was younger, I studied under a Native American instructor at CMU and learned a few things, and so you know, it's like we all have our influences on stuff.
Sure. How did you decide on what songs were going to be included?
Well,
was that just kind of loose?
Yeah, we recorded probably double what is on the disc, and then I did rough mixes and sent them around, and we picked our favorites, and the ones we pretty much agreed on the most are the ones that ended up on there. It wasn't really like, okay, here's at any given time, I think we're working with 20 to 30 pieces pretty much, and so we recorded a lot of things for the last 2 CDs that we haven't even, you know, used yet. So, you know, it's always in flux, that kind of thing.
How much input does your label man, Mike Khoury, who plays on this on Entropy Stereo? How much input does he have with you on everything?
Not really any with the music. He's a lifelong friend.
Yeah.
And I've had a hand in helping him with the label at times. And he listens to it and says, "Yeah, cool," or something. I think if he didn't like something, he wouldn't. But pretty much, we're kind of putting out what we want to, and he would be a voice in what we chose on this one for sure. So.
That's cool that he helped you guys out. I see that.
Yeah, he's kind of an official member of the band now, and off and on, I played with him for many years, and I've known him since he was in junior high. And his father taught in the art department over at CMU, and he knew I was really into music when I was a student, and so I asked the sons to come over and hang out, and so I've kind of known him a long time.
That's awesome.
One guy worked at his brother worked at the record store for a few years too.
How do you get the word out that you've got a new release now? Is there a tried and true method that you're kind of using?
No, not really. Again, that's the nice thing because Mike has his label and he has a few distributors that will just buy stuff from him. So we've got a handful of sales that way out of the gate. But no, it's to me it's weirder and weirder. Some stuff we've got things up on Bandcamp. A few sold that way. I was talking with Fred earlier. I sold a couple overseas, and like one CD was $20 to mail. It was like, wow, the CD was 10.
Yeah.
It's like it's weird now. The physical thing is, and I teach like you, and I always ask my students what they listen to music on, and they all listen on their phones. Nobody has a record player or CD player.
Yeah. And I confess, I'm kind of going that way too.
It's understandable why, but it's weird because like they're almost like a glorified transistor radio.
Right.
I don't know about you guys, but when all my friends, we had to have stereo systems.
Well, of course, I've still got mine.
Yeah, exactly. and that was kind of. It was part of it, having the sound system.
That's right.
And have that experience, and. Like I have students and they don't hear any bass in anything. It's like,
yeah.
Well, and there was that sharing element too. It was such a big deal,
right.
When your favorite band put out a new album and, oh man, getting with 4 or 5 people and, listening to the album, maybe firing up something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And now it's song lists on Spotify or something.
We said, 10, 15 years ago in Mount Pleasant, I had 4 or 5 friends that all had really nice listening rooms and sound systems. And every month we go over to somebody's house and hang out, check out their adjustments on their stereo systems and stuff, I tweaked this.
I can't think of the last time that I did something
it's been
like
a while
that.
Now.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I bet you 40 years, where you had a group of friends that would come over and listen to things together on a stereo. It just doesn't happen anymore.
When you're broadcasting, do you go between vinyl, CD, MP3, or what do you...
CD and vinyl mostly.
Yeah.
And that's it's interesting because I just emailed a friend of mine who does a radio program in Albuquerque, New Mexico on PBS there. And he was on the other night. One of the CD players broke, and they didn't have a replacement. And that's happening at our station, and they're pulling them out of the back room and plugging them in. And I'm kind of Robert Barkley and I are a little fearful that when the CD players go down, it'll just be like streaming. And like we both use our collections to do our radio programs from. And so they have turntables in there, and CD players, but it's starting to get iffy, they've got a library of 20,000 albums, and it's just sitting there.
Yeah, well, that's the same everywhere. I know at the Saginaw Valley, I used to use a lot of video cassettes, to kind of you can edit things easier and stop and pause and so on. Well, they don't have video cassette players anymore. You know, and of course CDs. You can't buy a car with a CD player anymore. You know, that forces you to use your phone.
At the moment.
It forces you to use your phone.
Yeah.
So wow, everything's so different now, and you know, of course, vinyl coming back.
I don't. Yeah, but I don't think it's coming back.
Well, no, not.
I stopped at Barnes and Noble on the way here, and they had about 30 copies of Adele's album she came out with last year for half price. And, you know, I know people that own record labels that are putting out 500 copies of jazz records, really cool, high-end productions, and they have to wait in line forever because all these big companies think they can sell Adele and Taylor Swift. And so the cool records aren't coming out. And then when I'm seeing them sit on the shelf like that, I don't buy the sales numbers myself. I think it's like sort of like it looked like a fad. So of course the big companies jump on it like they always do. And I think they overproduced, and I think Barnes and Noble overpurchased, and you know
they're selling them for $30 a copy too. You know, so you know the old days of buying an album for $4 or $5, those are long gone.
We were looking into putting a couple of things out on an album, and a few years ago, it was about half the price it is now, and half the quantity.
That's the other thing. Yeah, is independent labels are harder pressed to print vinyl because of the cost.
Right. And then you know, again, I do know some people that put out LPs and they get test pressings and they suck. and so they send them back, and then, well, we're still pressing these mass, and so you're going to have to wait 3 months to get another test pressing. And so like a record they wanted to have come out in 6 months is like 2 years down the road. And
it's so far behind.
And they're trying to run a small company, and it's just like doesn't work.
It's funny, you walk into all those places and you see like Adele, or you see Dua Lipa, or you see the fad of the day, and then it's next to Fleetwood Mac greatest hits, Van Morrison's greatest hits, Van Halen's greatest hits. It's like they're not digging at all. It's just cream of the crop. Now you can walk into Cracker Barrel and you get the same experience. I was in there just recently with somebody to look for a job, and I'm like, you've got 1984 by Van Halen, or you know, it's like it's just whatever's available or whatever they're getting rid of out of the bookstores. Or something. I don't know.
Isn't there a local vinyl cutting thing? Jordan was telling me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of anybody personally that's doing it right now.
Yeah,
Jordan's working towards that, but it's kind of been in the works for a while. So it hasn't, to my knowledge, materialized yet.
As far as I know, it's Detroit.
Right,
Archer
Third Man
record.
Right,
When I talked to him about my new record, Jordan was saying, dude, it's not ready yet. After all them years of talking about it, he's like, it's too expensive, and there's just too much behind it, and their ideals, I think, have changed and what they're doing. I know Jordan's releasing all his music now finally too, and he's just going straight through Bandcamp digitally.
It's a lot of work, and then you know, the people that really know how to set the lathes up properly, they're few and far between anymore. And then a lot of people, I don't know, the whole thing is weird. Like they'll use like an MP3 file to press a high-end record, and the sound isn't really, you know, and so you don't even really know what you're buying. You know, like you know, it's like, you know, and I'm kind of like into the best sound possible that you can extract from something. So
when you go to record, you guys, what kind of is it you bringing in the system, or how is that going about when you're at Delta recording
with the recording equipment?
Yeah.
I borrowed a couple of microphones from a friend that had a pair, that really nice pair of microphones. So, but yeah, I sort of organize it in advance. And through the years, I've collected, you know, mics and cables. And working at the radio station, there was an engineer there for a while that was really, really great with stuff. And he like hand wound cables for me. I paid him to do it back in the day, one by one, you know. And so I've kind of accumulated stuff.
What was your system that you used? Are you a Pro Tools guy or Personas or what?
No, I like record on a multi-track digital recorder. It's a Mackie, and then I dump it down, and I record through tube preamps, and then I dump it down through tube equipment and do a stereo mix, and I don't do any compressing or anything like that. All the dynamics are what we do. And so I really try to, and I find that using the tube equipment really sounds great. It's just something about it, that I've always kind of, just like with guitars, really great tube amp. There's just a magic there with the sound, and I think the same thing's true with stereos. And so I try to introduce as much tube analog into it as I can.
Right. You definitely got it. I've got all the records, so you definitely have a role you're going on with here. And this ensemble's a bit bigger this time, kind of like it was back just at the end of the Faruq and Dennis Gonzalez time.
Right.
You guys had quite a few guys coming in and out. You're back, but I think there's later instruments on here, so the sound got a little
kind of
wider.
like partly you get to know different people, but it's kind of always been a fantasy of mine to have. I play bass. I love the strings, so we got violin and cello, and it's sort of like a jazz horns and strings blend, and I love some of the textures you can get with all the bowing going on, and that like I said, it's just sort of not a lot of bands through the years in jazz that have a lot of strings in them, so I'm liking experimenting, seeing what we can come up with.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know you've been teaching a rock and roll class at Delta College for many years. Did you ever think about doing a jazz class
I do a jazz class and a world music class and maybe a blues class coming up here. I don't know. So I've done a jazz class ever since I did the rock class. It's just that you can fill more sections of rock than you can jazz. So the jazz classes don't always fill up, but when they do, I teach them.
So was the administration pretty accepting of these ideas of doing these various types of music classes? They're really kind of like music appreciation as well as history, right?
I designed the classes and presented them to them years ago, and they put them on the books. And I got the idea originally, when I went to college, not to get too overblown into this kind of a discussion, but I couldn't, they didn't offer at CMU at the time any kind of jazz or blues or rock and roll classes or how to play. It was all band and classical. And I was into jazz heavy by that time. And so I knew a couple of art instructors that were kind of into like progressive performance art, and they allowed me and my friends to play music and do performance art pieces. And so I got an art degree, which hasn't really paid a lot of bills for me, but it's why I went in that direction. And so in the 90s, when I was working at the record store, I went to mail some stuff at the post office, and they had a bunch of stamps of African-American jazz and blues artists. And I immediately thought, something's changed if the government's printing stamps of African-American artists. And so I found out that John Conyers out of Detroit had passed a bill designating jazz as an original American art form. And I knew at that point, having a background with my father being in education, that the colleges would start to give actual credits for those kinds of classes. So I designed classes, and I went around to schools and tried to sell the idea. And I got a class up in Petoskey in the summer one year, and it went okay. And then so that kind of gave me like my foot in the door a little bit. And I got hired at Delta to teach photography, but I kept kind of pushing for this, and they eventually went for it. And then, of course, after COVID, all the other classes they taught there don't fill, and my rock classes are the only ones that fill over there. So it kind of went from being this sort of fringe thing to being the main course, if you will. So.
Did you start out with the rock course, or did you?
Rock and jazz both. Yeah, and what I was trying to, because the jazz was designated as the original American art form, and they were trying to expand diversity at the school at the time, and I think it sort of
Okay.
worked out that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in that because, of course, I'm teaching that as well.
Right.
So, what was your approach or your philosophy with doing rock? Did you do it chronologically, basically?
I did do it and did it chronologically. My whole thing, because I am such a jazz lover, was to, right out of the gate, try to help share the knowledge of blues and jazz music with people, because all the rock bands I liked were redoing old blues songs, and once I figured all that out, I spend a lot of time in my class just playing blues and talking about the ingredients of the blues and how it came about theoretically, and discuss that as much as possible. And so I've always kind of been a proponent of digging up the roots a lot in the music, and so that I still try to do that. So
do you get into the Great Migration at all? The movement of people from the South and from the Appalachian areas, right. Because the auto industry.
And I talk about the first recordings and to whatever extent. Of course, the things that go over best are talking about Robert Johnston and the mystique around him and the fact he's a great guitar player. And I try to do a little bit on a couple others, Skip James and a few other people. And I had, I asked students to write their first paper and try to listen carefully to a piece of music that they already know and they've listened to a lot, and find new things in it. And I always use an old blues piece that something I didn't like when I was a kid that I love now, and how that process came about of me learning more about it, and as my example.
Yeah, and you bring Michigan into that, the rock history
big time.
class,
because that
bit,
influenced me. I don't think you could be in the 60s in Michigan and not be impacted as a young person by all that music. And it seemed like it was everywhere. And when I grew up in Traverse City, it wasn't a lot of rock music going on there. But there's this guy who started a record store, and he was A Square North, and he had the connections with Jeep Holland. And he started to bring all the Michigan bands up there. And so I benefited from that, and saw, Third Power in a gymnasium and all kinds of weird stuff.
And there was that teen club, that Ton's House.
Yeah, Ton's House, the
was
Bogey Club.
Right north of Traverse City, right?
Yeah. In the Bogey Club. I saw Bob Seger. It was like a boy-girl junior high club, probably the first or second year, East Side Story, and, in this teen dance club,
Sure.
Yeah, I saw Third Power in some gymnasium, and we're trying to bring rock music in. I remember they brought the Turtles in from Los Angeles, and they trashed the gymnasium, so they stopped having rock shows there.
The Turtles.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to the Club Ponytail?
No, I didn't. I don't even. That one doesn't even ring a bell. So.
Well, Iggy and what? Not it wasn't Iggy and the Stooges. It was the Iguanas.
Right. Okay.
They were the house band there for a summer.
Okay.
But that was a teen club. It was in a
Cadillac.
It was in Harbor Beach.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It was an old.
Right.
It was an old speakeasy.
Right.
And they converted it into a teen club. It had some real interesting aspects to it. There was like a tunnel that, if they got raided, people could escape down the tunnel and get away. But they had some big name people there. The Beach Boys.
Wow, that's crazy.
And this is in the 60s. Yeah. Shangri-La's, the Four Tops. Interesting place.
You know about the Stooges concert at Delta College in the 60s?
Yes, indeed.
That was like about the one and only, right? Yeah.
Well, they were banned from Delta College after that.
Yeah, right, yeah. There was Lenny Sinclair shot some film footage.
I asked, do you know Mike Mosher?
I know of him. I don't
Okay,
know.
Mike's an instructor art instructor at Saginaw Valley, and he was going to meet with Don. What is it? Carlion? Is that
He was president.
Yes, he was a Delta, and supposedly was his daughter.
Right.
That was the big rumor. And so I was going
to right on my leg. My leg made Rolling Stone magazine. Right here.
Now, do you know, Fred, for sure whether that was the dean's daughter?
No, I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. But
see,
that's the story I
There's
heard too.
video on YouTube.
Yeah, and Lenny Sinclair shot that.
Yeah,
film.
but you can't really tell. You can see Iggy in the background.
Well, yeah,
right, I've
but
seen
you
that
see
too.
The incident.
Yeah, you can
the
see
promoter
the incident.
went up to Peter Andrews, who promoted that concert and had all the bands, and told him, "That's the dean's daughter. Get him off of her."
Okay. All right. Yes, that's one of the famous Michigan tales right there.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of crazy ones. I had one of my good friends when he went to school in Alma, Michigan, and one of the art teachers in junior high took him to the Saginaw Fairgrounds to see the MC5 and a bunch of other kids from school. He said it was just insane, you know. You can't imagine something like that now, right?
Yeah.
Lawsuit world.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned Alma. Back in the 60s, I saw they were double booked, Procol Harum and the Jeff Beck group.
Huh.
And another time, Buffy St. Marie. So Alma College there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, working at the record store in Mount Pleasant, I mean, and I went to some shows in Mount Pleasant, but, they in the early 70s, they had Zappa and all kinds of people play at CMU.
Oh, I saw Zappa in '77 at the Rose Arena.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Well, Delta College booked a lot of groups in the 60s. I saw Paul Butterfield Blues Band
Really?
there.
That's crazy. Where was that at?
Ravi Shankar. They would have them right in the gymnasium.
Yeah.
Wow.
Kiss. All played at Delta College.
Alice
I'm trying to
Cooper,
think who else.
Blue Oyster Cult.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Butterfield's like second or third band. It was a big horn section in that.
Yeah, that would have been. I'm trying to think. 19.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
Woodstock.
either late
Woodstock,
1969
yeah,
or
Woodstock,
early
yeah.
70.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact date.
When David Sanborn was in the band.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was in the band.
Right.
That's fantastic. Hey, I want to ask you, Mike, did Dominic, and I probably said this in the first show, I apologize for those of you that listened to our first one and say, hey, Scott, you already asked this, but did Dominic and Donovan, your sax players, did they come through your courses and you got to know them through that?
No,
How
I
did you
got
meet
to know him at the radio station.
Okay.
And Jack O'Brien also
Okay.
that way. Robert and I do the radio shows on Sunday night, and they have student employees from CMU, usually from the music department or broadcasting department, help us log things on the computer and troubleshoot us old guys when we don't know what's going on with a couple of things. And like one by one, those guys came through, and you get chatting with them and invited them over to play, and one thing led to another. And what I understand now, that Dominic recommended Donovan take his job because it was fun and get to know Robert and I, and so he did. So I mean, it was kind of set up a little bit that way too. But I was like, I've done that for years, and and I've taught, and you have, and both those guys like immediately just blew me away with what they knew. Just remember the first night I was on the air when Dominic was there. Usually the students kind of ignore you. They don't want to know anything about jazz or anything. And I was doing a tribute to Bayard Lancaster, this Philadelphia alto player that had just died. And I was playing this piece, and I hadn't even really spoken much. Just hi, how you doing, to Dominic, and just a little ways into the piece, and he goes, is that in 7/4 time signature? And I said, yeah. And he goes, wow, he goes, that's really cool. And it was like, I thought, wow, this guy's really listening, and so I struck up conversations with him and got to know him pretty quickly then. But I was like all the years, I was just like, things like that just like really grabbed me. I was like, wow, this person's really listening. And, and he played alto, was in school, had never heard of him before. So he was fascinated by that because he could tell he was a good player. And so, one thing leads to another.
Right. Now, with Gilmore being gone for what, 5 years now, 4
Yeah,
years.
around that. Yeah.
And I see he's putting out records.
He's
got some
active
Bandcamp
playing
stuff.
down in North Carolina. I'm in touch with him a little bit. Yeah.
Do you and Nick basically come up with the ideas for the next realm of Northwoods, or how does that?
No, it's kind of a collective thing.
Yeah.
It was sort of like when we were playing with Faruq, Mike, and Skeeter all lived in Detroit, and Gil, Nick, and I had a connection before that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of like Faruq and I would interface ideas, and then, we'd coordinate it that way. And I kind of do it with Donovan mostly, and then he's kind of in touch with Dominic, and so, it kind of just works out. Yeah, but everybody's a pretty good communicator. I'm more of like an email than a text person, but
yeah.
Like I send out an email, and I hear from everybody that same day usually. Yeah.
You are the email king. Mike's
email is
all email.
is fading away.
Mike's like,
too.
Mike's like, don't send me a map. Don't do anything. I don't want to be. Mike's anti-Facebook, anti all that. So that's another question.
I'm like, not too much. I'm too impressed with technology in some ways, even though of course I use it.
Do you think that? And I probably asked you this one too, but I think it's a really good time to ask this one. But the fact that you guys don't have a social media presence minus Bandcamp.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a strong suit in the world of free jazz? Because it's always been a dig and find it thing?
In all honesty, that's because I'm not into it. And we're so fragmented, like nobody really lives together, hangs out together. I think if we were a little closer, something like that might materialize from one of the younger guys. But it's just, I talk with people all the time, and it used to be like, you had a scene, like you had record stores, you had bookstores, you had small venues where people played, magazines that the same people would read, and all that's gone. I mean, really gone. And that was my world. And I don't know, and I don't, like I said, I kind of against some of the way people just throw everything up for free and do all this stuff. And it's like, I have students writing papers and they're quoting somebody's comment on YouTube as like a source of knowledge, and it's like, wow, it's just, the whole thing is just scrambled. And even though there were flaws to that older system, you still had people editing quality, recommending something, and you had sources to say this is good, this is not good, or questionable, and that's just gone. And I find the whole thing to be kind of screwed up, and I'm kind of against just kind of tossing a hat into that ring. It's like, and I never have been in it for the money or fame and fortune or whatever. It's kind of all about the music, and as long as the music stays true, and we can do a little something with it.
Well, granted, I think the only thing missing by that not being there is just promotion.
Yeah,
it's the lack of promotion for anything.
Right.
But you got people that are still want to be crate diggers.
Yeah,
and it goes both ways. There's
right.
Overflow of abundance of people already on there,
right?
And then there's still ones that aren't, which are really difficult to come pinpoint. I think that's kind of a cool.
Right.
I mean, some of that good jazz is hard to find.
In the last week, I received 2 emails via our Northwoods website, which is kind of ancient. People that had just discovered Faruq, and were flipping out about him, and like Faruq's been passed away now for over 10 years, and said, I got to hear more, and so I think if something resonates with somebody, it's sort of timeless. And so I try to trust that too. Just do the best you can, and it's not really up to you to judge. Yeah. You can kind of tell when you've done something good or bad, but whether it'll move somebody else, you don't really know that. And sometimes something you did 10 years ago is more relevant 10 years later, and it's like it's all vague. And so we just like to do it. We try to do the best we can. We try to keep it pure, if you will, and not like inundate it with worrying about other things other than just trying to do the best we can with what we're doing and improving on it if we can, and that's just kind of the focus, I would say. So.
And this group of shows coming up here, and this is going to broadcast after these shows are gone. Tell us a little bit about where you're planning on playing for your, I guess your tour, basically.
We have just 3 shows. I mean, one's at Mid-Michigan Community College in Mount Pleasant, campus, and that was sponsored by the school there, and they've got a nice community room there that we're playing in. I taught there for quite a while, so I know the environment a little bit, and that's going to be in the afternoon, and it's a free to the public show, so that's cool. And then the next show we're playing is at the Edge Fest, which is in Ann Arbor, and that's I think one of the cooler free jazz festivals going around the Midwest, probably, and has been for quite a few years. We played it a few times before with Faruq, and one time as a trio. And we're playing Thursday night on a 4-day festival there.
Where's the festival held?
It's
Mike?
at Carytown Concert House.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and which is I can't think of the deli that's real famous right near there, but
Zingerman's.
Zingerman's. Yeah, right near Zingerman's. Yeah, okay.
There it is.
And it's actually a house.
Yeah, it is, and it's converted house, and it's really they've done a really good job with free jazz there through the years, and a lot of players have come and gone out of there, and so we're looking forward to doing that, and then we're playing in Bay City at Lullaby's coffee shop.
Oh, really?
There. Yeah.
Okay.
On
On the
Saturday.
west side, yeah.
And that's a free to the public show.
That's a week from the Saturday?
Right. Yeah, I think it's at 7:30 or something, and we're playing a couple sets there. So that's kind of what we're doing right at this round. This summer we played some gigs in Detroit. So.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go to the Jazz Fest in Detroit?
Yeah, we played there a few times too with Faruq, and they used to have it was a place there called the Bohemia National Home, and they used to do jazz festivals there, and we played that one a few times. That was just a great venue. It was this old theater gymnasium combo, huge bar. It was like a community center built back in the 20s, and the theater, it was like, I never was at the Grandy Ballroom. I was but from what I understand, the acoustics, and they were great. And this theater, the acoustics were incredible. It was really ancient. They'd have buckets for the water coming and leaking through the roof, but the acoustics were still incredible in there. And I just loved playing there. And they used to have festivals. They had this big bar downstairs, and they'd have a band play down there. Then the next band would set up in the theater, and then all the people would go up for that one. And then the next band would set up, and they'd rotate. And they brought some really amazing players in there, and those were always fun to play. But that got shut down, and I don't know the truth of the matter, but I heard that they were sort of squatting in that place, whoever was in there, and paying somebody under the table to live there and whatever. So, and that got shut down right about the time that Kwame Kilpatrick got arrested. So I wondered if it was connected. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go and quote on that, but it was a great place and really had some incredible music, and it was really cool acoustically, which I liked.
That's awesome. And you have a backlog of material, like you said, still awaiting.
Yeah.
For the future release here.
Yeah, and we got plans to record next spring again too, and so we just try to keep moving along. The string players in our band really have only played a handful of shows together, and so the last couple of shows we played, I thought, had a really more cohesive overall sound. So hopefully they'll keep growing. So.
Cool. Well, thank you, Mike, for coming on for round 2 with us.
Yeah.
And returning and to give us a story behind this record.
That's great.
Yeah. Fanfares, Northwoods Improvisers, available now, and use the Bandcamp link. That's always the way the bands can make better coin, anyway. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, cool. So, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP 989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. Don't forget to look for Mr. Mike's local music live series, posted frequently on MMHP's Facebook hub, as well as Scott's Mid-Mitten 15 from Harvest Canteen, featuring one-on-one interviews with Michigan music artists. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, Mr. Mike at YouTube at Mr. BT1. That's MRBTEE and the number 1. Brought to you by Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, located both inside the Bay County Historical Museum on Washington Avenue, as well as Scotty's Sandbar on Evergreen Drive at the Bay City Middle Grounds.
On behalf of our hosts, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and myself, this podcast wouldn't have been here without the voice of the MMHP, Mr. Eddie Switek, the generosity of the Bay County Historical Museum, which hosts the Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame, as well as this podcast, Mr. Alan Garcia, all of our guests, and especially to the listeners. We want to thank you.
Anytime, too, like down the road, if you guys, like, I'm really kind of interested if you wanted to do something on like record stores and that type of thing. Yeah, I'm kind of like leaning in that direction a lot, kind of, try to help gather some information and do something on that. I got a friend of mine that writes for a jazz magazine and The Wire.
Uh-huh.
And he lives in France, and he's been trying to pull together something on how old magazines and record stores worked and stuff like that. And it seems like a really cool project. And I sent him some photographs that I took. I used to work for Coda magazine in Toronto, and I used to go there a lot. And I had took photographs in there, and I sent him a couple of these old photographs. And when I sent them to him, I thought, wow, nothing's like that anymore. Like it's really, I was just even thinking in here, it'd be cool to have like a little display of like old record store environments, because it's a bygone era, really.
Yeah, there's not that many photographs. I know. I've got a couple of Lucky photographs inside of Lucky's record shop in Bay City.
Yeah,
and Fred's store.
I took a couple.
All of them.
And I think
Boogie Records when I first started working there in Mount Pleasant.
Okay.
But again, I think if you put the word out, it could be something that could materialize into something interesting, I think. But it's just something I've been thinking about.
Well, it was such a fun thing to go into a record store.
Yeah.
I mean, just to
cool
go
theme.
through the racks, looking for things. And
towards the end of my time in record retail, I was at School Kids.
Right. I love that store.
Yeah, me too.
My favorite store.
And
it was a great store.
Yeah.
For some reason, Tuesdays were the date that new records came out.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think at midnight, Monday.
Right, yeah,
It's
right.
Friday
So
now.
there'd be people lined up for
Yeah.
certain ones.
Right.
And we're
We used to
going,
do midnight
wow.
sales to compete with like Walmart and those places that were closed. And so the students would come and buy them from us first. And we would sell in Mount Pleasant like 150 Pearl Jam titles in 15 minutes, doing
Yeah,
that.
well,
Yeah, and of
what
course,
years
then
were
the
you
Best
involved
Buy
with?
started picking up on the
That was-
same
I
thing.
went to school.
78 to 2006.
I was there.
That was at Boogie Records,
Boogie.
Full
yeah.
Moon Records, and New Moon Records.
Yeah, Boogie. I bought Steely Dan Asia at Boogie. I can name Frank Zappa Life in New York at Boogie.
I still got
Anyway,
records with
it's
the stickers
amazing
on.
how you remember.
Yeah. Well, it's a big deal
What
going
you
to a
want,
record
where-
store.
I remember when Pink Floyd's last
You know,
record that came out in the 90s.
you
they had a
download it,
midnight
you know.
sale at the
Well, when I
Myers.
go to
And it was like, we
record
all headed to
sales
Myers because no one else
every
was doing
day,
midnight
all
sale in
the
our
state
area.
sales,
So we all
I
ran there for it.
sometimes see records with my label on it.
Wow.
So here I am. I usually have someone next to me, and I go, look at this. I'm buying my own record back.
I've done that online with something that went out of print, and it's like, I wanted another copy of it, and it's like, oh God, okay, go pay double for it.
Yeah, there it is.
Now, downstairs, he's got a UP collection for the Hall of Fame here. And that's the current thing for how long? For the
How long is that going to be
Yeah,
up?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be up for a while.
I know, but I'm like, how you're running that as kind of like the thematic area? Isn't that what you said? It's going to change every so often.
Well, periodically, but it takes so long to put something up. Yeah, it's not something you want to take down right away. Let me tell you.
But I thought, the record store thing could be a cool.
I agree.
Make that as one down the road when it's ready, and we do a podcast
idea
to promote it.
Yeah, it could be cool. Like I said, I wouldn't, keep me in the loop, and I'd be willing to try to run some things down. Like the store I worked at in Traverse City, I still know the owner who hired me there when I was in high school. He lives in Savannah, Georgia, and he sent me some photographs from there, and that was like 71 or 2, and they're really great outside shots in Old Town Traverse City. And but anyway, like I said, I look at these things and I think, wow, that was just such a scene there too. There was a time in the 90s when we'd have I remember the Foolery there. It was pretty good bringing in underground rock bands, and they had Black Flag come in and they did an acoustic set in our store, and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
It was like a scene, and that kind of stuff just gone.
Yeah, well, you were there, Fred. I'm sure for some in-store performances at School Kids. I saw
many. I was the one who had to put them on.
Chris Whitney, I saw there.
I was the promoter.
Yeah, that was really cool.
We had just from a little memory right now, Jorma Kogokin.
Oh wow, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was really good.
I bet, yeah.
He was probably there to play at the Ark.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, I saw him at the Ark. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yours was awesome.
Gillian Welch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Lord.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was just a whole, what's that band from Canada? I had a long name.
Cowboy Junkies.
No. Oh, shit.
Long name.
Yeah, it's like Boys in the Band or something.
I don't know.
Okay, that one's not
Our Lady Peace.
No, damn it. They had some #1 hits.
Fred, in a half hour it'll come to you.
Yeah, but it'll be too late.
I know it.
So,
My buddy
did
Sean's.
you work at School Kids when Mike Lang was there?
No, but I'm going to tell you what.
He was a genius, man.
I know it. I finally met him.
Yeah.
And when I met him, at that time, wasn't he became president of Blue Note?
And Verve Records. Verve.
Okay.
Yeah, he put out all the jazz stuff later.
Right.
For Verve,
okay.
Yeah.
So he brought to me and gave to me, and we hardly even knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
An Abby Lincoln CD to Fred. Abby.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I remember
still have it.
When he was working there, the jazz department was unbelievable in there, and I was buying a lot of stuff, and I go in there with a list of records, and they were ordering from Japan, and about the only store that I knew that got Japanese imports. And I remember I go in there with like obscure titles, and he would know the numbers, the catalog numbers of them. I'd like, this record. Oh yeah, Verve 70366. Yeah, it's like, okay.
Remember the big yellow
Most people
book?
didn't know what the records were, and he knew the catalog numbers.
The only one I knew was Yes 90125.
There was another guy there, David Wild, for a while, and he published some discographies on Coltrane later, and wrote liner notes for Impulse, and he was pretty cool too. But yeah, they always had all these kind of amazing.
Yeah, I belong to a Facebook group.
Yeah.
Former employees of School Kids Records or whatever it's called.
Yeah. I remember seeing you in there. I don't remember talking with you, but I remember when I go in there, I remember seeing you.
That was my main job was, the label. So I had a loft office upstairs. And sometimes, Fred, you got to come down. We got some people in the blues section. So
yeah, that was an amazing store to shop at. One time, my friend and I, we would save up money, and about every 3 months drive down from Traverse City to buy records. And we saved up some money, and he had a beat up car, and we drove down there, and went to school kids. At the time we spent like $120, which was a lot of money at the time for us being like, high school, early college age. And we were just leaving town and the state police pulled us over, and there were state police with rifles aimed at us and everything. It was like, we were pretty young kids. It was like, what's going on? And so they said, you have receipts for those records. And I happened to have my receipts. Normally I just pitched them, and so they looked them over, and they were doing all these phone calls, and evidently we matched a description of some armed robbery, and one of the things that got robbed were a bunch of albums from school kids, and the car matched the description. 2 guys with long hair and the Ford Pinto or something.
With a bunch of records.
It was a weird thing. And
well,
then,
the owner of School Kids, he wouldn't take shit. I remember during Hash Bash when I worked there, and that's when we had the most attempted thievery.
you're right, I bet, yeah, I get that.
So we were all right on it, and I remember one year he caught this young kid and made him wait in the back room for the police to come. And it was more of an embarrassment to hit for the kid, but I think he got let go.
The thing that was a bit problematic at our store was buying collections off people that had ripped them off from somebody else. And so I always got IDs and phone numbers, and that happened a couple of times where somebody, if it looked too good to be true, it usually was too good to be true. I learned that pretty right off with it. Wow, you're selling all your Led Zeppelin albums. And I was like, yeah. I was like, okay.
Where'd that come from? Right. Wow, well, fantastic. Yeah, that'd be cool. A little run of Michigan music stores, that's for sure. That's it's kind of a niche. I like that idea.
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of a cool thing. It's like one of those things. It's like I don't think people realize what's not there now. Like I said, when I stopped at Barnes and Noble, that stuff's not even organized that they have out. And it's like they got Miles Davis next to Neil Diamond, and it's like.
Well, see, at Barnes and Noble, speaking of them, when I first got my book published here in Bay City, no barcode. So, and I was living in Ann Arbor, but I was staying with my brother in Saginaw. So the first place I stopped to see if they wanted to buy any was Barnes and Noble's.
Yeah.
So I got as far as the manager came out, and he goes, "You don't have a barcode, we can't take it."
Yeah, what?
And I said,
Barcode.
"Okay."
It's also tracking for vinyl for albums too. So I learned my lesson a long time ago.
Yeah.
Everything that you want tracked and and legit, and it's a
I didn't give a shit.
Yeah, well, I didn't either, but they said you should put one on there. It's like, okay.
How many? A question I probably haven't asked, and I'm still rolling, so sometimes I put bonus footage at the end of our episodes. Have you guys, outside of me with "Starve My Eyes" on my first record, you and Gil played on that. I put me with Northwoods Improvisers. Have you guys done some side work outside of me? I think I forgot to ask that last time.
Yeah, we did a few different things. There's one release called Inscribe that we're on, and there was a real small label in Greece called Triple Bath, I think, and they put out a couple of CDs of kind of just improvising string things that we did with somebody else, and so
It's a little bit
bits and pieces here and there, but nothing of any consequence, I would say, but things around,
I thought I was so grateful for that time that you guys wanted to do that.
It was cool.
To this day, that's the track that people listen to, and they're like, "What's that?" 'Cause it's not a typical band for that. My first record, there, that song anyway. So,
when we were playing with Faruq, we sat in on a couple of things, but I don't know. We played at Cliff Bell's one night, and Jack White and the bass player and drummer came in and watched us after they did the state.
Is the Dirty Dog still open, or did that close down?
I'm not sure. I think so. I think it's still open. Yeah.
Because my friend R.J. Spangler was booking one of them.
Okay. Yeah. I know I think Dominic that plays in our band plays with RJ some these days. He told me he was. So.
I wrote the first story on the McRae brothers for a blues magazine in Europe. And
Larry played acoustic in our store one day. It was cool. When I was on the air one night doing my radio show, Question Mark called me up. I was really surprised. I had mentioned on the show that night, I was bummed out. It was like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that my dog had just died. And I wasn't into talking much because I just kind of was feeling down. So I said, so I'm going to spin more things tonight. And all of a sudden the phone rings and said, sorry to hear about your dog. And I said, yeah, thanks. And I said, who is this? And question mark. And I talked to him before. I thought, yeah, that sounds like him, you know.
Well, he lost some dogs in that fire.
Yeah, right.
You know, so he could empathize with you, I'm sure.
So anyway,
did he have a good conversation with him?
It was decent, yeah. I mean, and then I was right around that time. I had some relative of his, niece or something, in my rock class, and she really liked it, and so he mentioned that, you know, and then he said he liked listening to my show.
She works at Gillies.
Yeah, I was just going to say she works at a store down on Johnston Street in Bay City.
Okay. So there was like the dog, and then her, I think, were sort of like his inspiration for.
Yeah, he talks to her a lot, according to her.
Okay.
You know, Gary, I gave you the CDs he burned of the Michigan rock show he did in the late 80s and early 90s.
Right.
Yeah, that's all them. The question mark is supposed to be on one.
I interviewed him, but it was pretty bizarre.
Well, I know what you're saying. He's difficult to talk to.
Yeah, it was hard to even get a soundbite that was hip, you know, like I was just trying to get some facts or concrete, you know, an interesting story or something.
Goes on these rolls, you can't even get a word in.
Yeah.
Well, that was like Shaky Jake when he lived in Ann Arbor.
Are we talking about the rock band or the blues guy? Yeah, okay.
Well, the Saginaw Street.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay.
I think more blues now.
Yeah.
But I got him on the Blues Festival. But anyways, he was from Mars.
Yeah.
Him too?
Know, in interviews, he's from Saturn, he's from New Orleans.
He's
from there, and when he died...
He should be in my class right now. I think
when he died, I called up the Ann Arbor News, and I said...
That would blow their minds.
I'm the one who brought him, and they knew who I was, or the writer did, who I called. And it was in the file, but I said, no. He's from Saginaw, Michigan. I brought him here in 1973.
Fred put his foot down.
So anything you want to know, so for the funeral info, they used what I...
That's cool that you lined it up.
Well, he's not from Mars or New Orleans or anywhere.
You know Bark of Paper Mulberry?
Mm-hmm.
I know Ron Graham, who was in the band.
Okay, do you have a copy of that?
I think I do.
Okay.
I think Ron gave me a copy of it.
When we were running our store in Mount Pleasant, it was before the internet, I would get calls from Australia and Spain every once in a while.
What's the name of the band?
The Bark of Paper Mulberry, and they were a Mount Pleasant band.
Yeah, well, who's the player, though, that went on to Nashville? And
I can't think of his name.
Dan somebody?
Yeah, and then there was there's a music store in town, and the guy's kid was in the band. And so, anyway, this was like I say, before the internet, and I'd never heard of them. But I asked around customers, and they said, oh, yeah, that was... And I can't remember the guy that owned this music store. He said his son was in the band, Schaefer Music. So I went.
It was Dan Schaefer.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So I went down to Schaefer's Music and I talked to his dad, and he got a hold of his son, and his son still had a few copies. And I said, I think this guy paid $100 for it. This is like a '92, way back. And he goes, really, And so he dug a couple out, and I sold one to this guy in Spain, and he gave me one for selling it. So.
I talked to Wendy.
They recorded that at the Art Shield recording studio.
Oh, okay.
Shield wasn't there.
Yeah, okay.
That's when, who was the guy that had that satin brass?
John Lipinski?
Yeah, John Lipinski. That's when Lipinski owned it. but he was still operating it at 405 Raymond. Then he moved his operation out to by Winona Beach somewhere, out, and then went out of business. Yeah, Lipinski is an interesting guy. When he was in the Army in Fort Hood, Texas, he jammed with Elvis.
Okay.
Then Elvis had a house that was rented off base, and he would invite musicians out there to play music off the bass.
Yeah.
And Lipinski got to go and play with Elvis.
Wow.
Wrote his family about it. Letter from Fort Hood.
That's so cool.
Yeah. His daughter's still alive. That's how I found out about that.
I have a friend, in jazz, Sunrod.
Sunrod at the Ann Arbor Blues Festival.
I had a friend that was walking down the street in Ann Arbor one day, and Sunrod and John Gilmore were walking down the street, and John Gilmore was playing the saxophone, and he took a couple of photographs of him with these parking meters. It was really crazy. They had this weird hat, pyramid-like looking hat on.
You said at the Blues Fest, Gary?
Yeah,
that was the only time I've seen him.
Yeah.
And that
me too.
Totally freaked me out. All the girls were like flies or something. I kept looking up there, and I'm going, "What the hell is that?"
I saw Sunrod many times.
But you had something going on too.
Well, yeah.
So maybe they didn't.
No.
Were you tripping or what?
Yeah.
Well, something. Something in it.
He's used to a glass slide on a guitar. That horns were just freaking him out.
They were dressed as like flies. I mean, I've seen pictures of this. I didn't make it up.
This is beautiful.
I saw Sunrod in Ann Arbor in the late '70s, one of the theaters, and it was like the first piece was like 2 hours long, and they started out. They had that huge drum that they made out of a tree that got hit by lightning, and the guy was up playing it with these sticks, and then a dancer came out, another dancer came out, then a fire breather came out, and it was like a circus thing, one by one. And then Sunrod and June Tyson, must have had like a lift down in the basement to bring pianos and stuff up to the stage. They had this huge throne, and they came up on stage sitting on this throne, and Sunrod was. And everybody just went nuts. It was like a Beatles concert or something.
That was so cool.
But I had it was one of my first Sunrod shows, and it was like, I had records, but I wasn't quite prepared for that. It was like, whoa, what is this? This is jazz? What is this?
Space.
But it was pretty spectacular. But
that was amazing.
The visual presentation.
Yeah, it was total, street theater, like vaudeville, almost anything goes,
That's cool. What a great story.
Do you know Harvey Pekar, the guy that did the comics? I
remember seeing him.
Yeah.
He used to be on Letterman all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
I wrote for Coda Magazine, and the first serious article I ever read on Sunrod, he wrote it. I didn't know who he was at the time, but then we started selling at the store, comics and things that he produced. And then when I was looking at it one time, I thought, oh, that's the same guy. Well, that's crazy. And then when Sunrod died, he wrote a special comic in the Village Voice about Sunrod, and riding on a bus from Chicago to Cleveland or something, and happened to get on the same bus with Sunrod's band, and it was like it was pretty crazy.
That's in a coda?
This was published in the Village Voice. I made a copy of it. I can give you a copy.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, but anyway, it's pretty amusing. I just knew like those comics that we sold in the store, and then when I kind of put the pieces together, I thought, wow, that's a really good article on Sunrod, and he wrote that. It was like, wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
We used to sell a lot of,
Zap
not a lot, but a lot of Sun Ra records as kids.
I bought them all myself, so I still have them, and I bought them at shows, and I kind of went from thinking it was weird to loving it, so.
I wish that would come back, the whole thing. But the thing is, you can't make any money at it. You have to do it for free, to almost like an art show, and to bring it, to bring that whole thing around.
Yeah, it's really, the whole thing is just so different,
I was thinking the same thing I was watching Zappa's Rocky and Elsewhere on Prime or something, and I'm like, at the end there's topless chicks running around on stage and all sorts of shit, and the band's jamming out. It's like, they would go do 10 nights in a row in New York, and that would be every night for them, just having whatever happens. And Zappa's just directing a show through the whole thing, and it was all free, kind of, even though the music was structured, and it was like, that is just not anywhere anymore, like it's all heavy down your throat.
Topless chicks on stage.
And crazy Sun Ra street vaudeville shit.
But everything
I'll
got
work on that.
everything got so money oriented, right?
It
it's
is.
like whatever, you could go see bands for $5 or $6 or $8, and then all of a sudden they're selling out stadiums and bringing in millions of dollars of equipment for one show, and
and tickets are.
Yeah, it's like going. It's like going to going to a playoff game in sports too. It's like, wow. Like when we were playing at Cliff Bell's this summer, first night we played there was a Thursday night, and all the Illich bought all these parking spaces around there, and you got to use a credit card or something to no cash, and so it's like they were like $15 to park there.
The city parking app.
Yeah,
I had to download that thing too.
And then the second night we were there, that was $30 because there was a show going on, and then there was a sporting event the next night, and there was $80, and we just parked way away and hiked in. But so somebody's just sitting at home and seeing what's going on and
changing it up.
Yeah.
You had all your gear already in there, so you didn't have to load.
Yeah.
Or you load in and took off.
So we just parked away and walked.
No
doo-wop? But none of them were doo-wop. I haven't sold a doo-wop record in a while.
That's right. I can't sell my book here, but I can sell them out in New Jersey.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm big in New Jersey.
Goes, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with our music. It sells better overseas.
Oh yeah.
Well, European audiences have a better appreciation of American music than Americans do.
Do you
It's
sell
crazy.
many in Japan?
We used to. This new one, not yet, but I don't know. Like in the past, we have. Yeah, some of the things sold better there than any place else.
I sold
in South Africa, oddly enough, too.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I sold one of Mike Brush's albums to Japan. And so I told Mike about it. I said, hey, Mike, you ought to maybe try to get a gig over there or something. And I gave the guy Mike's address.
Yeah.
So Mike ended up selling him a whole box.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, you better get more than one gig
I looked
if you're
into
going to fly to
going over.
Japan.
We got 6 members in our band, and like the costs scared the heck out of me. I thought, man, there's no way we're going to make that.
Well, they got to pay for it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. But anymore to get somebody to do that,
right?
It's like, wow.